Welcome back to the Business Simple podcast. I am your host, James. I'm very excited for this episode. I have a long-term client, someone I'm very lucky to call a close friend of mine, Matt Horncastle, on the podcast. Matt will touch on this. Has done some really incredible, unique stuff in the property development space. I believe it's 1.3 billion in handed
just
over
under,
property.
But pretty close. Yeah,
pretty close. That was with a B, by the way, as well. 31. 31 years old.
1993.
Yeah. So obviously there will be a lot to cover in terms of that in your story and things like that. Also, and just for the listener, the purpose of this is to try to humanize some of these people who've done these really cool things. I'm lucky enough to know Matt well, and I know that he is very
well.
human. And I like the idea of someone who's wants to do more, wants to be inspired, knowing that there are people out there that are doing cool things that they're made of the same stuff that they are. So I know you're a busy guy. Thank you so much for coming and sitting down and joining us today.
No, thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. How would you like to do today? Do we go in linear fashion? We could do it like a Tarantino and start at the end and then jump randomly back to the beginning in all different facets.
Let's go the story as an overview first, if that's okay. And then I'll jump in and I'll stop you at points. And then I've got some specific questions that I've kind of structured out that I think might pull some pretty cool stuff out as well. So talk to me about, and I already know the story, so I'm going to be conscious not to brush over some of the really cool parts of it. But talk to me about young Matt, what he wanted to be, and sort of a bit of that, maybe that period through to starting Williams Corporation.
Yeah, cool. I'll quickly Tarantino it, just giving the end where we are today. So at the moment, I'm one of the owners of Williams Corporation. Williams Corporation is a residential infill property developer. We build homes that are affordable to buy, affordable to live in, affordable to maintain. We can live, work and play. We've developed about $1.3 billion of real estate. So that's physical keys to customers, bought the land, got the consent, built the property, sold it, got the money. We have, as of today, we have development offices in Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland and Tauranga. We have had development offices over in Australia. We've got a sales office over in Singapore. We've got a support office in the Philippines. Even today, in 2024, where we're trading in a tough economy, Williams Corporation's still done sort of $150 million of sales in the last 12 months and circa sort of $200 odd million worth of delivery, maybe a touch more. So we do a lot of stuff and then sort of just telling that journey of how we got here. I come from a property family. I'm very fortunate. I've got amazing parents. My father was one of the larger house builders in New Zealand. For the local audience, they'll remember Horncastle Homes. My mother's in construction. She was one of the only, I think she was the only female master builder in New Zealand at her time. She ran a company in Nelson called Key Properties, but the whole family, aunties, uncles, cousins, granddad, all property people. So my journey is not too interesting in the beginning. My mother and father split when I was young. I lived with my mother. My father accumulated a huge amount of wealth and success. My mother did well, but was a very conservative single mum. So sort of when you're a kid, I noticed that you see money differently only in the transition of money. So let's say you're middle class and you're all around middle class people, that's sort of the way it is. Or you're poor and you're only around poorer people, that's the way it is. Or you're rich and you're only around rich people, that's the way it is. So I had an interesting childhood of essentially being middle class and then every third weekend seeing my father that had accumulated a huge amount of wealth. And so I had this desire to accumulate wealth, and I always saw my father's wealth as his, and I felt that I didn't have any wealth. So even from a very young age, accumulating wealth was very important to me. I also went through the teenage problem with authority, didn't want to be told what to do by my parents. So that sort of ended in me leaving home when I was very young. I left home when I was about 14, living with a family associate. And I left school on my 16th birthday. this is a great story because it sort of really shows my relationship with my father. So I remember calling my father and saying, "Hey, Dad, I've just turned 16. I'm going to leave school." And he's like, "No, you're not." And I'm like, "Well, good luck stopping me, right?" And he's like, "You're not leaving school." And I'm like, "Well, I am. I'm literally walking out the door now." And he's like, "Okay, hold on, I'll call you back." Hangs up, calls me back and says, "You start work tomorrow as a building apprentice for your cousin." And I'm like, "Hey, credit where credit's due. I had no plan. This is a plan. Construction sounds good. I'll do it. Thank you very much for your help." And I'm sure my father called my cousin and said, "Break the kid. Make sure the kid goes back to school." So I start my first day as a commercial apprentice builder, building commercial buildings. For those that haven't done commercial construction before, this is 6 till 6, proper 12-hour days. You're running, you're driving sledgehammers, you're tying steel, you're doing brutal, hard, labour-intensive work. I probably weighed 65 kgs when I started, and like you slinging a sledgehammer all day or throwing around a crowbar, brutal. Like I had to have the bandages in my lunchbox, and every morning tea break and lunch break and afternoon tea break, re-bandage your hands because they're all weeping and gross before you get your man construction hands. You still got your schoolboy hands. So I go through this journey. My cousin is a very special human being, like 6'4", 120 kgs, but then freakishly strong for his size on top of that. So hyper strong, hyper hard worker, and I was in a really good gang of guys. Like we were commercial construction, but just tough, hard working. And so after sort of a year of that, I developed a skill set where I was competent, I was reasonably well built, I had my confidence as a person, I had my strength, I had good thick hands. Like I'd gone through that character building phase that has sort of transitioned me from being sort of a boy to being more like a man, which was really, really instrumental. When you're in construction, it's quite interesting because a lot of construction people own companies, and that's because everyone around you owns a company, especially when you're doing construction in a small town. So you'll be sitting at the pub after work, you're sitting with the jib stopper who owns his business, you're sitting with the plumber who owns his business, the electrician that owns his business. So owning a business was very, very normal. It wasn't some crazy thing. So I started doing jobs in the weekend, as you always do as an apprentice. So I was building decks and fences and going through that menial graft. And when I started my company, it's an interesting story. I got a job once to build a shed, and I said, "Can you pay me cash?" And he's like, "No, you need to send me an invoice." And I'm like, "Oh, what's an invoice?" I think companies send invoices. Bearing in mind, I'm not overly literate. Right, I'm young, I'm 17, not overly literate, haven't really worked out how life works. And this is sort of pre-mass internet. We didn't really Google stuff, we didn't really know stuff. Like, I just remember not knowing things. And so like when you wanted to find stuff out, we went and asked people. Like I didn't Google how to make a company. Yeah. So I drove to my mum's house and I'm like, "Hey mum, I've got this job I need to do. I need to send an invoice. To make an invoice, I need to make a company. Can you help me make a company?" And my mum's like, "I'll call your father." So she calls Dad, and Dad goes, "No, you're not making a company. You're young, you're immature, you're not emotionally developed enough to run a business. No." And I was like, "Oh, okay, right, it's not very good." And then my mum's like, "The neighbour down the road, Craig, has an asphalting company. I'm sure he'll help you." So I drive down the road and knock on the door. "Oh, hey Craig, I've got this job I need to do. I need to make a company to do this job. Mum said you'd help me make a company." He's amazing. Takes me into his home, makes me a coffee, sits me down in front of the computer, and he's like, "Here's the company's office. Here's how you register a company. Take this to your bank, get a bank account made. Here's how you send an invoice." Gave me one of his invoices. So I walk out of Craig's office and I know how to make a company and I've got an invoice, and I sort of got into it. So at that time I was an apprentice builder working and making $13 an hour. And from memory, I think I used to get about $750 or $780 in my hand after tax for a week's work. That was roughly the numbers. And then when I did jobs in the weekend, I could make $1,000 a day. So all of a sudden I'm like, I'm going to be a tycoon. So I'd work Monday to Friday for my boss, as fast as my little legs would take me, and then Saturday and Sunday for myself. And any job that I could get, I did. So I'd build retaining walls, decks, fences, all that stuff. And that was the beginning of Matthew Horncastle Builders, which I ran for many years. Now, when I turned 18, that was when the Christchurch earthquakes happened. So my father actually called me. I was building a refuge station on the west coast, and he called me and he said, I don't understand what's just happened, but he obviously understood there was an earthquake, but he said, I don't understand where this goes or what happens from here, but there's going to be opportunity, and you should get in your truck and come down. So I resigned from my job as an apprentice builder, came down to Christchurch. I was reasonably competent, got into sort of different construction areas, some associated with my father, some of them I'd done myself, all sorts of stuff, essentially selling my labour as a construction worker. And then I went through the process where my skill set was higher than just selling my labour, and I could employ people and I could run a crew selling multiple people's labour. And then I got to a skill set where I could do labour and materials and take a greater margin. So I'm going through this development of Matthew Horncastle Builders. And a few key things that happened in that journey was, one, the Health and Safety Act got reformed. And during the Health and Safety Act reform, they made it compulsory for construction sites to have a fence. Now, back then, construction sites were just there, and you just knew not to walk on them because you might get hurt. So you've got this change of legislation, and there was an opportunity there, so I started importing temporary fencing and ran this temporary fencing company, which was quite large and quite successful. And I did a little bit of other stuff. I was buying diggers and dry leasing them to people. I was a bit of a wheeler dealer.
Yeah, waste management.
That's the next piece of wheeler dealering. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So what happens is I have this business that's doing construction labour, temporary fencing. Blair was my 2IC, and we had a joint venture doing business systems. And we had this good wee business running that was making good money. And I got this phone call from my father's general manager. And so this was at the point when my father was running Horncastle Homes, very large, very successful, very well-known company. And he said, hey, we're having issues with our construction manager at the time. He can't do the job. He's got another issue that he has to sort. And we need someone that can just walk into the business, be known and respected by the team, and run the project managers. And at the same time, Horncastle Homes was signing a contract with Lumley Insurance, and they were going roughly from building 150 homes a year, which was their standard business, to building another 150. So they were doubling essentially overnight. Yeah. And this is all standalone homes all over the city. Yeah. There was a team of 22 project managers. It was a complicated business. And he said, right, I need someone just to walk in and do this. And I always loved the family company. I loved that my name was on the door. It was something that was very special to me. It was a company that my mother and father built together when I was very young, before I was born. So it had this nostalgia, which was nice. And so I thought, yeah, okay, cool. And so I said to Blair, my 2IC at the time, I'm like, right, you have half of Matthew Horncastle Builders. We'll rebrand it to something, which we'll come back to in a minute. You have half, you run this business. I'm going to go into the family business. I'll probably never come out. And you can just have half this business forever, and any money you make, you just cut me my check for making it. And he's like, cool, man, awesome opportunity, thanks. So I go into the family business, and that was a key part of my development, because that was where I sort of got corporatized and developed. So that's where you're reporting to a CFO, you're running large teams, you're responsible for hundreds of millions of dollars, you're responsible to clients, you're responsible to insurance companies. So to me, that was like my university education, was the year I served at Horncastle Homes. Now, anyone that's been in a family business, you know that there's relationships and nuances to being in a family business. And the nuance that I had to deal with was my father didn't see a competent young 20-year-old, he saw his little boy, right? And so he talks to you accordingly. So he was always tough, but tough because he wanted the best from you, and then you're also his kid. So him and I would butt heads because I didn't think that I was being treated with enough respect, and he's like, I've given you the opportunity of a lifetime, shut up, do as you're told. So like that sort of bubbled away in the background, but I went through this amazing education and development within the Horncastle empire. At the same time, I remember checking my bank statement one day, and I think when I transitioned the business over to Blair, we were roughly making, call it 300 grand a year. So my check was like 12 grand a month, or something generally pursuant with that. And then I checked the bank account, and I'd been paid like 24 grand for that month, or some reasonable amount of money, or that was my piece, or there was something of that nature. I said to Blair, I'm like, you've overpaid me, or my account's been topped up too much, or something like that. And he's like, no, we're just going really well. And that was sort of the first time I realized the quality of Blair's competence and quite how good he was. He was running a business that I'd set up better than I was running it. So it was like quite a big moment of, this isn't just a childhood buddy, this isn't just my 2IC, this isn't just the best guy on the day to transition the company to. This guy's actually probably more competent than me as a manager of things. Yeah. So that was quite cool. I bubble away through my year at Horncastle. I have a tipping point with my father where there was no return, and I call Blair and I'm like, right, I'm going to leave Horncastle, let's conquer the world. And so we look at the business, and it's something generally pursuant with our construction business is making 200 grand, our fencing business was making 200 grand, Blair was doing some IT consultancy work that was making reasonable money. And we're like, every business makes $200,000 a year. The way for us to be millionaires is we make more businesses. So we go through this empire building phase. So we make a solar panel company, we make a waste management company, we make a, what else did we do? We were drop shipping watches, where every dumb thing you can imagine we're doing. We had a civil company with trucks and diggers. We had a large civil company with trucks and diggers. But so we're doing all this stuff, and as you can imagine, we'll start falling off, right? We go from making a lot of money to losing a lot of money really quickly. And so we realized what was happening. We start offboarding staff, we start offboarding staff, we start selling down all of our fixed assets. And it was really hard. We were in our early 20s. You're selling a trailer to make payroll that week and to pay your redundancy pay, and just this awful, awful thing to go through. And so we're going through this downsizing phase, and I said to Blair, I'm like, we've really got one shot at something, because we don't have that much time and we don't have that much liquidity. Like, what do we do? And I'm like, I really enjoyed building houses. So by that stage, we built a couple of houses, and I'm like, I enjoyed that. That's in my DNA. I've done it my whole life. I'm good at it. I understand it. I'm like, let's just go all in on that. And so we start buying land and building houses using the money that we were getting from selling these machines and selling all this stuff. We brought in joint venture partners, and we did everything we could. And so we go through this phase of exiting our previous business, entering into the new business, but we didn't really have a point of difference other than being enthusiastic young guys doing everything ourselves. So we were following the traditional model, or kind of the traditional model. We're buying cheap sections in infill areas and building homes. We're also buying houses on large sections and building a house out the back and subdividing it, selling the front house, selling the back house. So we're going through this sort of quasi-semi-traditional market, creating a semi-traditional product. And we're going okay. Like, we'd transitioned out of the previous business. We had an okay functioning business. We're probably building 30 homes that year, something generally pursuant with that. And I drove through the city one day, and back then, for the people that don't remember, Christchurch had this huge earthquake. It was one of the largest insured events at the time was the largest insured event on earth. Our city was closed via military cordon. There were no one there. There was this sort of construction happening, but the city was a ghost town. And people were seriously having conversations like, will the city ever come back? Will anyone ever live in the city again? Like the city you see today is nothing like the city from 8 years ago. People legitimately thought the city was going to fail, and people thought they would never come back. We're still having aftershocks. I remember laying in bed one night, and there was a big earthquake, and I'm like, God, have I put all my money in a city that's not even going to be here? Like, it was a scary, emotional time. Yeah. And so I said to Blair, I'm like, I want to be part of rebuilding the city. I'm like, I want to do something. I want to do something with that. That matters to me. If I'm part of doing that, that's cool. Blair's like, yeah, awesome, bro, but we've got no money. Details. It's just details, Blair. And so we went on Trade Me and we found the cheapest section available in the city. And it was a 150 square metre section, and it had a 150 three-bedroom house drawn on it. And the house would have been worth 650, 750,000, something like that. And I was sitting there one night, and we had the section under contract, and we are going to buy it. And I sat down and I drew. So I used to hand draw all of our plans. So I have my ruler and pencils and everything, my drafting board. And instead of drawing one three-bedroom house, I drew 3 one-bedroom houses. And I'm like, wouldn't these be cool? I'm like, then any young buck can have his place in the city. I'm like, they'd be real affordable, and some young buck can just buy it and have his pad in the city. And I called a real estate agent, and I'm like, what's a one-bedroom in the city worth? And he's like, I just sold one for 370 grand. Yeah. And I was like, that works. 370 times 3 is significantly more than what that that 3-bedroom was going to be worth. So long story short, we actually bought another site at the same time as we were doing this because I worked out what was happening. And we released a development of 10 one-bedroom townhouses, and we contracted all of them in 36 hours. And I was like, oh, baby. I'm like, we've got this. And I'm like, no one is servicing young professionals, downsizers, investors, creating high-quality, affordable houses in good areas. And that was the foundation of Williams Corporation that you see today. So we just cranked. We went, so like our our development company went from like 3 to 30 to 60. Actually, do you know what? I'll read you the actual numbers so I can fact check myself.
It's good, cool. I've kind of deliberately just left you because you're running on a complete screamer, and so I've got about 40 questions, but I'm just gonna we'll work our way through this because there's some momentum.
Sales of our development company went from 3 to 8. What year
was that? Sorry,
3 was 2017.
Yeah.
That's financial year 17, so sure. Calendar 16.
Yeah.
So we went from financial 17 3, financial 18 87, financial 19 108, financial 20 318, financial 21 627, so on and so forth to today. But the development company went from $1 million in sales revenue to 350 million of sales revenue in 5 years.
Yeah, right.
Like on.
Yeah.
And so then what happens is you find all of these new problems, right? So one of the fundamental problems we were having was we're selling all these houses. We couldn't get enough money, right? So we're going from, I think at the time I was like Kiwibank's largest active trading customer with like 35 million, and you have 25 million from another bank and 15 from this bank and 10 from that bank. And I went around all the banks and our whole capital stack was like 80 million. And this is at a time where we're doing 30 million of sales a month. Yeah. Right? Like,
it doesn't work. It sounds like a big number for the average listener, but that
doesn't work.
No, because you're going to just sell yourself out of money every month.
We were facing a very serious risk of running out of homes and having to wait 12 months to get homes again when we had this literal queue of people trying to buy our product. Mm-hmm. And so I walked out of a meeting with one of the banks, and he said something along the lines of, "You're allowed 20% growth this year." I said to my business partner, I'm like, no one's ever going to tell us what we can and can't do. No one. I said, especially a banker. We're going to make our own bank. And so that was the foundation of Williams Corporation Capital. So Williams Corporation Capital is a fund that we created. There's technically 4 funds, but I'm going to talk about it like it's one for the purpose of simplicity. So it's a wholesale fund we created where we pool investors' money into a company. That company takes security over all of the developments that we're building and all of the companies and personal guarantees and trusts to give a comprehensive security. And then they put their money in and they get a prorated share of the security through their company shares. And that just cranked. So in 4 years, we raised $290 million. We've returned, at the peak of the market, we had $158 million under management. We've paid in excess of $50 million worth of dividends. And we created a mechanism to finance a property company in a manner that I've never seen before. So there used to be the finance companies that would raise money from people and lend to various institutions or builders. There were the syndicators that would raise money for assets or multiple assets. But I'd never seen anyone in New Zealand make a parallel branded fund or finance company that supports the activity of a property company in a dual brand manner. And very successful model. I would probably say most builders in New Zealand now have a fund off the back of what they saw us do. And so we go through this. So we're sorting the money problem. You're always having human capital issues. You're always employing staff, bringing people on. We're opening up new cities. We're opening up Australia. We're doubling or tripling every year. And we get up to 350 million. And I'm like, well, we doubled last year. Like, we're only a couple of years away from hitting $1 billion. And by this stage, I'm probably too ambitious because we just had such a large run of success. So we have offices, Christchurch, Wellington, Auckland, Tauranga, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, sales office in Singapore, support office in Philippines. You're walking through a shopping mall in Singapore and there's someone with a Williams Corp model selling you a Williams Corp townhouse or apartment, like wild.
Big. I remember you telling me that story of getting in the lift and starting a conversation with one of the guys, and he's like, hey man, hey, what do you do? He's like, I work for you, Matthew. Yeah. Like you're detached by this point.
Yeah, 250 staff.
Yeah.
Wild. And so we get into 2022 and I start to realize that the market's going to collapse. And in the beginning, my mental model for a market collapse was the GFC, right? So I go, we're going into a GFC style event. Prices are going to drop 8% and we're going to see this for a 1.5 year period. And I look at our balance sheet and I look at all of our numbers and I'm like, we can eat that for breakfast. We could probably still grow through that. Then things just got a bit harder. Like we went from selling roughly something like this, 100 and something houses in a month that was circa 75-80 million to 1.5 years later, which is 1.5 million. So you go from monthly sales of 80 to 1.5, right? How do you manage construction, delivery, capital lines, etc.? And so I start doing, but we didn't got to that point yet. We're going down that slide. Mm-hmm. And so I start doing research about different events, and I realized that my mental model for the GFC is not the right mental model to use. And then you start researching like the Great Depression, where it's a 40% drop in values for 10 years, and you look at the factors that led to that happening, and you go, okay, well, the factors up until this point aren't as bad as the Great Depression, but worse than the GFC. We're going to have some sort of intermediary event, which is what we've seen. We've seen circa a 15% collapse in values for a period of time that looks to be 3 years before we have a fundamental recovery, say 3.5 or 4 years. So it's literally exactly the middle between a GFC and a Great Depression. And so we're managing this, and I'm like, right, okay, I need to get 5 years of powder in the tank, right? 5 years of powder with the powder that I have. So we go through, firstly, so each year you have different challenges. So the first year, as the market started collapsing, we'd already sold the houses, and it was the liquidity to build them. That was like our first war. And so it's just get the liquidity, finish the projects, bank the pre-sales. Get the liquidity, finish projects, bank pre-sales. And then we come out the back of that, and that was fine. We traded that position. And then you're downsizing staffing, so you're reducing your overhead. And then the next thing is you enter into this. Essentially, you've got to rip up some equity. So you're looking through your book, you're looking through what you own, you're like, okay, let's just sell that, let's just sell that, let's just sell that. And then at the same time, you need to rip up some equity. You need to then recapitalize that equity. So you're going back and looking at your existing investments and saying, okay, let's sell those, throw that money in the company to make sure the company has enough equity to trade. And so you go through that, and then you enter into this stabilization phase, which is where we're in now, where you go, okay, we know based on the last 3 years of data, we're selling circa 12 million a month. Our deliveries are slightly higher than that because we still have some legacy pre-sales from the previous bull market. Based on $150 million of sales a year, what is an appropriate overhead, what are appropriate capital lines, blah, blah, blah. And so now we've sort of settled into our new rhythm, which hopefully will build up and get a bit bigger, because I would like the business to be bigger. But also there's a reality of you've got to pull your ego out, and it doesn't matter what you want. It is what product are you giving to the market, what volume is the market purchasing that product, and what margin can you find within that transaction, and then working backwards from there without the ego in the transaction. So we've gone through this really, really interesting sort of 3-part series of sort of me developing myself as a person that could run a business, me developing corporate skills, me developing business skills, finding a fantastic business and a fantastic model, riding it all the way to the top, and then downsizing that same business and that same model through a relatively complex market to where we are today. And I think Williams Corporation, the Williams Corporation management team, have done an exceptional job. Like, we've done over $1 billion worth of development. Never missed a bill payment, never missed an investor dividend, never missed an interest, don't owe anyone anything, like you're current on your position. It's been very, very well managed, considering the growth and then the market challenges and the reduction in size. And also one other thing about me, because I have such high standards, people quite often don't understand me, where I'll walk out of the month's sales and I'll be fuming because we did 17 sales, $11 million, and I'm just grumpy. And people go, oh, Horncastle's hurting. And it's like, well, it's not hurting like how you think it's hurting. It's hurting because we're not living up to my standards that I set for us, my standards I set for myself, which is something I need to manage. I need to manage communicating to people that we're a really great business that's going really well, with run by someone that's very public in how they communicate with very high standards.
Yeah, and I think that overall, and like I said, I'm in a privileged position because I know you, and like we get to talk off mic about stuff, and I know the ins and outs and how everything works and what's involved and all that sort of stuff. But I've caught myself, because I'm quite passionate about my buddies. Like, I don't have many people that I'm really close with. I've caught myself in situations where stuff has been said about the business or whatever, and I'm like, hey bud, like, we've been working with these guys for 6 years. They've never missed a payment to us. Like, I don't know what you're doing walking around saying they don't pay their bills. I'm like, say you don't like them, all good.
Yeah,
someone says
fine.
They don't like me, it's all good. But I'm like, not the integrity of the business. Like, say you don't like the...
And they can not like the product. That's all fine. Good. That's all cool.
Good. Yeah.
I don't need everyone to like the product. I only service today 1% of New Zealand's first home buyer new home market.
Yeah.
I only need 1 in 99 people buying a new home to decide that I'm the right provider to them.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love that to be 2%, but it's not a big percentage. We do not pretend that we're an everything shop for everyone. We've never said that. Like when I talk about Williams Corporation, I say it all the time. I'm like, we are a business. The way to visualize us, we're like the Tesla or the Hilux of property. We're not the cheapest. We're not the most expensive. We're an upper middle, good quality brand with a focus on first home buyers, investors, and downsizers.
Yeah.
So because it's kind of like someone looking at a Tesla and saying, I hate it because I want a Lamborghini.
Yeah. Like, I hate electric cars.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay.
Cool. Don't buy one.
Yeah.
Like, it's fine, man. Oh. And obviously within my story, there's things and stories that are really great and really exciting that I'll tell in 10, 20 years' time when I write my book. But for the purpose of just everyone, like we have run the business really well. We've always did what we said we were going to do for a long period of time. And it's not, it's good that you're around us because you see always pay our bills and how important it is to me. Like, and how I always do everything possible. And it's funny because people hear paying your bills and they're like, yeah, sure, obviously, man, pay your bills. Yeah. Construction
does not happen.
Construction is useless at paying bills.
Or like we're treated like a bank.
Yeah.
Like like it's not only do we pay the ad spend and do these things for these people, but they're like, oh yeah, sweet, we'll get to it. No comms, no nothing, no. And like there were periods of time where my business, and I touched on this in another episode I recorded today, in my business where like I was completely fucked, like grip it, like white knuckling it, trying to pull through this thing. And there were months where like the thing that kept the wheels spinning was the management fee from Williams that would come in 7 days before it was supposed to.
Yeah.
And the week before I'd been like, I don't know how the fuck I'm going to make payroll next week. And this money turned up that wasn't even supposed to be there. And I'd message and be like, hey, I just wanted to thank you guys for, always being early, blah, blah. And you guys are just like, thanks for providing a great product. Like it was just like the exchange of services for cash. It's different. It changed my perspective on things because before working with you guys, no one was paying me on time. So, and I don't come from a business family. Like I don't know what you're supposed to do. And so I just thought, just no one pays each other on time. Like that's how it works. And I was like, this is all good.
I agree.
This is fine. I don't need to pay. I'll just pay when I get to it over the next couple of weeks afterwards, and I won't communicate or whatever.
And how would you know if that's all you've ever seen? You're just like, this is just the way it is, right? And the only reason we are so passionate about paying people on time is exactly what you just said. I remember like it's yesterday, running my civil company, there was money that I was due that wasn't being paid and just feeling helpless and angry and infuriated that I couldn't meet any of my commitments. I was struggling to meet my Christmas payroll. I was, like you said, as you said, white knuckled, just pain and anger and helplessness. And I said to Blair, when we're top of the food chain, which is the fortunate thing about being a developer, we're top of the food chain in terms of the payroll. So you imagine the money coming in, then we filter it down to everyone.
Funded to you.
Yeah. So we would always pay on time, always, no matter what. Yeah, always.
So, like I said, as you're going through that, there's just like question. Do you want another one of those?
No, they're good. I'll do the Coca-Cola. We've got a very good selection.
Keep cycling through beverages.
Of different beverages.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, I suppose probably some of the ones that are like, because like I said, I got about 40, but there's some that I just can't ignore. I suppose probably the first one is there is a lot of being transparent about and we've already touched on it, like the market feedback. I manage the Facebook ads. I see the comments. I wind up in the conversations with people because I'm stubborn. And I do these things, right? And I think a common thing that pops up is, and you talked about them a little bit, is your relationship with your father and this idea that everything's just been given to you on a platter, right? I think that if anyone took the time to listen to that story, they would see someone who's extremely competent and who's worked really hard to get there. And I get to see the operation, so I'm privileged and I understand that. What has that been like? Like, has that been a bonus? Has it been a negative? How's it been for you?
definitely net positive, right? I have family complexities that I wouldn't discuss on a podcast, right? There's always nuances of a relationship, and there's ways that you deal with each other that you wouldn't just have a public rant about.
Yeah.
But the principle is, I come from a family of people that, like take my father as an example. He came from a really hard life, hard. Mother dies when he's young, foster care, tough life. And he has come out of being an unreasonably poor family on the west coast of New Zealand to being a very successful, well-known capitalist through New Zealand. But he in lots of places, I still see him as this person from the west coast. He's still got that real toughness that someone that comes through with no money has. And he's always held me to a high standard. He's given me so much, but not money, right? And that's what you need to understand about, I assume, lots of wealthy families, but for the purpose of this, my family, I've had so much, but it's not money. It's not a handout. And if anything, my father's tested me financially to develop me in manners that were probably just really difficult for me at the time when I was younger, right? He got me to do things and showed me how the world works, so I developed into the person I needed to be who I am today. But any concept of Williams Corp's funded by Bill or Horncastle Homes, Williams Corp is Horncastle Homes, Matthew was financially supported by his father, is just factually not true. But for me to say that I'm self-made is also a lie as well, because so many people everywhere helped me all the time.
Yeah.
And I look through my cousin doing my building apprenticeship for me. I look through just sitting there venting to my father, or my mother coming into the business. And I have so many people, but even random strangers who I talk to that just for some reason cared about me and wanted to be part of my journey and helped me.
The guy down the road that helped you set up the company.
Yeah, the asphalt.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that has some substance and is worth touching on. The concept of being self-made is entirely an ego play. It's the idea of essentially comparing yourself to someone else who's done more than you, but going, but I'm better because I did it by myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, no one did it by themselves.
Yeah.
No one. I talked before about us knowing to pay bills on time. That came from working with you.
Yeah.
So you've played a part in us shaping the way that we are, and obviously in many other ways aside from that, or my father and seeing some of the stuff that he's the relationship he has with clients impacted us. He's helpful. There's my boss from the door-to-door company, my this, my that. There is 1,000 people that are involved in the construction of anything that's worth doing. Anyone that's self-made, just hustling, flipping t-shirts on the internet or whatever, hasn't really built anything anyway. It's to them it is, but when you look at substance and impact on a market and an environment and things like that, which I think is different, it can be more profitable. They can make more money, but in terms of creating jobs for people, in terms of building a small economy around it. I love my staff buying houses and seeing them make more than they thought they could do. All that sort of stuff is really powerful.
It's a general statement that makes me uncomfortable, the self-made statement. And also, let's just go back. You should use every advantage that you can get your hands on, right? If your family has wealth and you have access to use that wealth, you should, right? Doing something worthwhile is very, 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 very hard. And any advantage you have, you should utilize. Any connections you have, any capital you have access to, any unique things about you, any unique things about people in your network, use every single advantage that you have. It makes me think back to the Matthew principle, which is a funny name, right?
Yeah.
So the Matthew principle is essentially based on a verse in the Bible, and I'm going to butcher it, but it's something generally pursuant with, for those that have everything, all will be given, and for those that have nothing, all will be taken, right? And so that verse in the Bible, they use it just as a placeholder when they talk about an economic rule, and the economic rule is the Matthew principle. And it essentially says when someone has an advantage and has success, they tend to accumulate on that success and get even more. And for those that have a disadvantage or a problem, it tends to accumulate on that problem the wrong way. And so what you want to do in life, you want to be putting as many possible things in your favor to then accumulate on and accumulate on and accumulate on. So it's accumulating on your network of people, accumulating on your capital, accumulating on your reputation. Anything you can get in your favor. Now, in my journey, I didn't get capital from my father as part of that journey. But if that was on the table, I would have used that. Right? I've taken capital. I manage on any given day. At the peak of the market, we were probably managing 400 million. On any given day today, we manage about 200 million. I manage a lot of capital from a lot of people, and anywhere where I can get access to that capital, I'll manage that capital and use it to accumulate my advantage, right? If my father called me today and said, son, I reckon you're a real legend, here's X, I would not say no, I would take their money, right? Just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that I wouldn't do it. So I think there's this, when I was young, there was this dumb entrepreneurial spirit, and it was hustlers don't sleep.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Blair and I used to do this dumb thing where we would like sleep for 2 hours and then have like naps, and we tried every single sleep cycle because we were led to believe that you should reduce your amount of time sleeping so you can increase your amount of time working.
Yeah.
Now, we all know that sleep is pretty much a foundation of cognitive ability and human health and human well-being. And if anything, you should prioritize sleep over work and make sure you try get your base 8-hour block so you can do the extra creative cognitive things for your success, right? At the moment, there's a dumb thing around the self-made thing. Don't worry about that. Like, to a young entrepreneur listening, any advantage you can get your hands on, just utilize it, because it's so hard and you need to put pretty much every single chip in your favor.
Yeah, sure.
Do you remember that hustle never sleeps culture? Mate,
when I started, that was peak of it. And we wound up even doing work with some people that were like that, and we realized that essentially, once again, like the the self-made thing is ego, and it's not really true. The hustlers never sleep. The guys that were saying they didn't sleep were sleeping. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just one of those.
I must admit, Blair and I tried it. Blair was better at it than me.
Blair still is.
It's horrific. Because if you Google alternative sleep patterns, and we were doing the most extreme one, I'm sure it was something like a 90-minute base sleep, and then it was 4 20-minute nap. It was horrific. Yeah. You feel like you're going to die and your brain's foggy. And
well, I've just had a baby and I get like the sleep thing compromised. Everything goes out the window, eh? It's, you hang on for a few months there. And then all of a sudden you're all good. But it's pretty manic.
And actually, leaning on that network thing, our group of friends, we've had a really good relationship. There's lots of us from different businesses, and we have various group chats where we chat about stuff. Like, we have our book club chat, we have our business chat, we have our fitness chat, and we just are always, hey, this is what I'm trialing for my fitness. This PT's good. Have you read this book? Have you read this article? We're constantly pushing everyone around us to be better, and then we accumulate the success from everyone else's success, right? The fact that you've done really well in business, you can just call me and buy an investment property, which, thank you for your business, by the way, but that only happens because you're successful, and I would like to think that I had my little slice of contributing to your success. But I don't take credit for your success. I was just a piece of your journey, a piece of your accumulation.
There's two, and we had a conversation about this the other day, so I'm going to kind of cheat a little bit because I know what your answer is already. But there's two things about this that I'd really like to touch on. The first one is the lack of ego is the only thing that allows that group to work. And that's what stems into my next piece. But essentially, if you want a productive friends group and you want people to help each other, you compete healthily. You do not, and you understand the hierarchy and you do not get jealous of someone else's position, and you all contribute in a way that is reasonable based on your means, and you all do stuff the right way, and you add value to each other wherever possible, and you think about each other, and you be genuine people, and it works. It is not hard. And there are a lot of people who, and like, this is coming from like, I would argue that I mean, I'm considerably younger than everyone else in our group. When I first started really talking to you guys and hanging out, I really didn't have that big of a business or anything like that. But one thing that I understood, and this flows into my next step, is like, I got where I sat and I was completely comfortable with that spot in the group. And like, it's just a base respect. Like, I was like, hey, here I am staying in this beautiful accommodation that I could never dream of affording to stay in, thanks to having this cool group of people that can do it. And I've kind of paid a little bit, but it's sort of like a nominal show respect amount to be here. Because of that, like, I'll just be like kind of nice, and like, I'll make sure I keep the place somewhat tidy, and I'll be like, hey, do you want a drink every time I get up? And I'll just be fucking respectful. And then people will want me around. Like, it's not even hard. Like,
but also on top of just being a nice guy, like, you had a skill set that we all knew we needed, that none of us had at the level required for our businesses. So you coming into our friends group actually increased my status because you're hyper competent at the digital world. None of us were managing the digital world sensibly or well enough. And you would sit down with people and you'd be like, hey, this isn't right. You're not doing that. You've got to get on these ads. This is sort of your cost. How much are you making from this product? Okay, you can do this, this, and this. So outside of just being a nice person, you were very competent in a skill set that we lacked, and my status increased by my buddies having that problem solved. And so you're there as well because you provided value outside of being a nice person.
Yeah.
And people will say, oh, what a gross transactional friendship, blah, blah, blah.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
It's everyone providing value. It's like, it's not you do, it's not like we're like, right, provided you do this, you can hang up.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's everyone just going like, hey, we're just going to pour into the bucket in the middle, and we know it'll be full at the end, and we'll be happy. So then, and because obviously a lot of this podcast is targeted towards a younger person or a person who wants to level up their business or their environment or whatever it is, I suppose the takeaway that I'd like to try to get across, and I'm interested in as to whether you'd use the same words, is contribute. If you want, and you know, it takes time and be patient and things like that, but if you want to level up, say your friends group, I have people who talk to me and they're like, I just want to hang out, or like, can I buy you a coffee or something? And it's like, that's not the answer here.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's more like, try to add value to people, do that to 1,000 people, and you'll probably just find 10 people you'll be like, they're mine, like, that's my people. Those are people who think the way I think, they view the world the same way as me, and it won't be hard.
Yeah. It's funny because you can only really connect the dots looking back. They don't connect looking forward.
Yeah.
So like, looking forward, the safest way for you to get what you want is just provide value and be a good person. But then looking back, everything becomes so obvious. Like, you look at our group of friends, everyone fell into their place just cause. It wasn't some like you said, we didn't have a meeting about it, right? People just fell into the place. So like, if you just really try and add value, and normally you need to just give and give and give and give and give. Now, that's where you need to work out who you're being friends with, because there will become people that will, a proper person, when you give and you provide value, they'll provide reciprocity, right? So if you're someone and you're giving and giving and giving and giving and nothing's coming back, you need to reevaluate the people that you're with. But you'll normally have people that will say, okay, thank you for doing that for me. I can provide this to you, like a sort of barter culture.
And it's not
but it's
specified.
Informal,
It's just like, hey, cheers, man, I got this buddy that needs this, I'll connect you to.
Yeah.
And it's not because they're like, oh, that will provide you X value and you provide me what. They're just like, you help me, I'll help you, it's all good.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I've got, we're building a home, and we've obviously just bought the place off you, and there are a lot of options out there that we did not look at, because it's not about the option. And I think that's really cool, is it's like, I've just always, since when we first started working together, been like, it'd be cool to buy a house off those guys one day. And it's fucking cool to have finally done it. And I'm really excited to see it come out of the ground and finish it. and it's just cool. It's just cool. And I really like the product. And like, I love that Manchester Square is the development that it is for you guys, where it's kind of this flagship that's going to be there forever. And those apartment towers are basically bunkers that are 7 stories high in the air, and there's that much concrete involved in them, that sort of thing. And so it's just cool to like have a bit of that. Will it make money? Will it not make money? I don't know, but I've got a house in Auckland right now that doesn't make money, and I don't think about that very much. And so it's just like, these things are semantics. Everyone gets stressed about the wrong stuff. It's like, just do good shit with good people and do lots of it.
Be a good person. Yeah. That was one thing we were always very, very good at Williams Corporation, is generally caring about someone beyond what is reasonable and normal for a traditional sale.
Yeah.
Like, if you're the person that actually knows the customer, actually knows his wife's name, actually knows the kid's name, like, remembers key things about them, calls them on Christmas and buys them a Christmas ham and says, thank you for your business this year. You spent a lot of money with me, and I just want you to know I appreciate it. And, like, just doing that extra piece for another human being to show that you recognize that they made a big decision with you and you care about it and you value it. Like, I'll always stop. I'll be doing a seminar and someone will ask a question and say, something, my Williams Corporation, blah, blah. And before I answer, I'll say, I just want to say thanks very much for your business.
Yeah.
Like, just care. And I know everyone says this and it's so obvious, but just if you can work out how to go through your sales process as a business and really, really care about the other person on the other side of the transaction, I can't see that strategy even not working.
And it was like that purchasing. Is Blair called me and he said, thank you for your business. I will not let you down. I live here. This project's what I do right now, and I'm going to make sure we deliver to your expectations. And I was like, pleasure. I'm stoked to be a part of it. Like, you just, like, and like, that it's because he actually feels that way, and obviously you message as well, and like it's just, I think it does add a level of there's more substance to what you're doing.
Completely agree.
So sticking with, I mean, we could just talk.
We could go on any tangent
forever.
anywhere.
Yeah.
I was on Bible passages before.
What I'd really like to touch on, there's a few things. I've got about 20 questions that we absolutely won't go through. But what I'd really like to touch on is, we've got your story. We've gone all the way through to where you are today. We've got all of this stuff. What is it that you guys do from a practical perspective? Obviously, you talk about care and stuff, but I want to know about building the homes. I want to know about you drawing the plans back in the day and how that's shaped. I want to know about the stock you're building, what you're liking. Like, I'm really interested in all that stuff. Obviously, what I bought is for the purpose of Airbnb.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's a huge market there that people just don't understand. And I looked at it and I was like, all this thing would really need to do is turn over like $1,000 a week, which is sort of 3 to 4 nights of it being rented, and it's a top floor, and it would make sort of give or take a 10% return. And that'd be pretty cool. And there's not much. So like, what is it that you guys are doing at the moment that you're loving? What would you, is there anything you would have done differently if you were to go back? Things like that.
The differently going back's a hard one, because it's like, it's so easy to look back and just critique yourself everywhere. We have always been very competent at construction. So you go back to Williams Corporation, I drew the plans as a builder, right? Yep. We then brought in people, and the architect or the draftsman sits next to the project manager. When we start a project, we have a team meeting, we bring all the plans up, we have all the trades around with pizza and a beer, and we say, what details won't work, where are the problems, blah, blah, blah. So we have always been a business that's focused on buildability, competence, material selection. And I'm very aware that when I build a home, I've got a 1-year defects period and a 10-year structural period. Me personally, although technically legally it's not personally, but morally it is, I'm on there for 10 years, me. And so that person at any time for 10 years, and I have to guarantee that structure. So we take that very, very seriously. And I look at people building some homes, and I look at it and I think, do you understand your material selection? Do you understand the risk profile of the building you've built? And do you understand that you're warranting that for 10 years? And I think in most cases the answer is no. They do things to look pretty, but they don't actually understand how the components go together, where the risks are, where materials can fail, how materials can fail, how products perform in an earthquake, like what maintenance people do and don't do to a home. So first piece, really engaged, really competent, really close circle in the delivery side. As far as the product side, I agree with your base assessment before. Christchurch is fundamentally, in my opinion, undervalued. We're at the tail end of a $40 billion city. Christchurch is the second largest city in New Zealand with 400,000 people. It's the gateway to the South Island, which has 1.2 million people. We've got the $40 billion rebuild finishing. We've got key assets like the $750 million stadium. We've got the aquatic centre. We've got the convention centre, which has just opened. We've got the arts centre that's about to open. And all of the other projects around the city making this a new world-class city. And Williams Corporation can provide high-quality, well-located properties with a resource consent for 365 days of Airbnb a year, where we're looking at returns of sort of gross returns of anywhere from 7 right up to 12%, depending on the property you choose. It is very, very easy for us to get a property that grosses 10, nets 6, 7, and even in current interest rate environment, you can 100% finance it and it's still cash flow positive. And that's before the $750 million stadium finishes, which is going to do 42 events a year. So that product I really love. I think that's an absolute no-brainer. And the other really cool thing is we're trying to buy land at the moment and we're struggling. So what I like about that is it's reasonable for me to assume our next round of land purchases is going to be at a rate significantly higher than the rates we've currently paid. And so we've then built this little fortress for our customers where they've physically bought under replacement cost. Yeah. And then the next round of stock significantly more expensive, which I want. I want my customers to be making money from a capital perspective, but also a return perspective, a cash return perspective. But yeah, like Christchurch, like Airbnb, like the quality of the product, most people can't nail the triangle of development.
Yeah.
So within the triangle of development, you have sales, finance, and construction, delivery, right? And normally what happens is someone might be very competent at 2. So your typical developer might be great at sales and finance, but can't do construction. There's a developer in mind that everyone can think of, which I won't name, but that's like that, right? Or someone might be great, they have lots of money, they can build something, but they can't sell it. So Williams Corp was a very unique business because we were very balanced in the triangle. We could sell, finance, and deliver in a manner the market probably hadn't seen before. Yep. We had years of selling and delivering 42 houses every single month as a private company, not as a franchise, not as a public listed entity.
Well, you were the largest privately owned builder in New Zealand.
Yeah,
period there.
Yeah.
Based on resource consents granted, there's our...
Yeah. I think based on lots of metrics we would have been,
Right, I got to scream a question. I've never asked you this before, right? But I'm going to tie it into a story of a friend of mine. So they've just bought a home that is based around sustainability. And I had a meeting with a developer this morning, and they were talking about it, and they were like, "I don't think the materials they used are very smart. The house looks really pretty." There's a lot of things about it that I suppose are a bit of a draw card as far as a property goes. They're in there, shower starts leaking, mold in the wall, jibs off, baby coming soon. It's all go, right? How much do you think people overvalue the look of a home and undervalue the functionality and livability and durability of a home when they look at the overall property market?
Almost everyone. I have a huge grievance with a developer that'll pick a trash construction methodology, won't make fundamental easy improvements to the structure, to the waterproofing, to how the house is built, but put Italian tiles in and some swanky French taps. It just drives me mad. People focus on finishes and looks without actually understanding how a house is built, how the engineering works, how the maintenance works, how the material selection works. People are weak at that. Very, very weak. And it's because no one's ever really... There's very, very few construction businesses in New Zealand that are developer builders that have been in the market 10 years to understand the length of their structural warranty and build accordingly. Yeah. Like only a handful of people. And also like when people get into these alternative products, they start to mismatch material selection. They start to put things together that shouldn't be put together. So they're trying to achieve some R rating or some thermal property or something, but they can't actually visualize the properties coming together, the components coming together, and do it accordingly. Yeah. And that's where you end up with issues like your friend's having, which is horrible, by the way. You spend a huge amount of money. You think you're using a professional company, maybe they were, and you end up in this really difficult situation.
Yeah, and sure, they came back and fixed it, but it's not about that.
It's not about that.
It's not about that. It's the
good on the builder for fixing it, though.
Yeah, fair. But I mean, they've got to, and it's actually done now. The dehumidifiers cranking and drying the room out, and the jib's back on the wall. Yeah. And it'll be in time for the baby, but not by much.
Yeah.
And if like the concept of having a newborn myself, the concept of having that newborn in a room with mold is fucking terrifying.
It's scary, yeah.
Because they're pretty fragile little things. They're pretty fragile.
It makes me remember back to a time when I was at Horncastle Homes, and this customer called and they're like, my house is leaking. Went there, water on the garage floor, and I was like, okay, it is. Went round, couldn't work out the leak, checked the plumbing plans, cut some holes, couldn't work it out, started pulling more jib off, couldn't work it out, and I'm like, I'm really sorry guys, I can't work this out. Week later, house is leaking again. Well, this is random, every week it starts leaking. Long story short, they were skiers, and they would go up to the ski field, snow would be under the car, park it in the garage, it would come out. It took us about 3 weeks to work out that it was just snow melting from under the car. So yeah, it was a good learning curve. I was probably a bit gun-ho cutting the jib off the walls back then. That was when I was 20. I'm more wise now.
More wise. You check the snow.
Check for snow. Check for if the customer's a skier.
I'm just time conscious. I've got an idea for another episode we can do straight after this, so we'll chop into that, and it'll be perfect for what we're looking to do. But we have a closing tradition for this. We have one question, which is if you could give yourself, when you were starting over, one piece of advice, or if you could take one piece of knowledge that you know now that you didn't know then, or there was just one advantage you could give yourself, what would it be?
It's so hard. But the reason it's hard is because everything's a dichotomy, right? So like you could say to yourself, don't be so aggressive, but the raw aggression is what got me through the hump to the business we are today. You could say better quality reporting, but there was a lot of times where because my reporting wasn't good enough, I made aggressive decisions which turned out to be good. Actually, that's what I'll stick with. I'm going to stick with really good quality, accurate, real-time data on your desk every day for every part of the business. Everyone's accountable to data, audit data accuracy, and understand your numbers to the T. This is how much money's in your bank account, sales, leads, delivery time frames, maintenance logs. Every single component of your business needs to be linked to a data system. The data needs to be audited, and it needs to be visible to you daily. Quality of data.
Yeah, it's a good answer. And we love data.
Yeah.
We love data. Right, thank you for all listeners. That was a banger. That was really good, right? Yeah, I'm stoked with how that came out.
How long was that?
About an hour.
Good talk, bro.
Good talker. So thank you very much for everyone that listened. Obviously, follow the podcast across all platforms. Stay tuned for more. You can find us on Instagram, Spotify, all of those sorts of things. YouTube, if you want to watch. We've got some cameras just like over there set up. So I'll see you on the next one. Chat to you all soon.